So could we just start with an introduction from each of you about who you are, kind of your journeys and kind of where you are right now in terms of professionally and kind of the balance of liver and GI? Do you
I'll
want to
start.
go first? Oh, go first, Dr. Aday.
My name is Ariel Aday, and I am the fellowship program coordinator or director. Sorry, I'm talking about coordinator all the time right now, but at Southwestern. And I did my residency and fellowship at Southwestern. And as far as my split between GI and hepatology, full disclosure, am not a card carrying hepatologist, but our program is very liver heavy. And as a GME leader, I think that general GI, general hepatology kind of fall in our laps. And so I'm heavily involved in coordinating mentorship amongst our fellows that are interested in hepatology and assisting them with the decision on how to place their transplant hepatology year if they choose to go that route. And our continuity clinic covers Gen Hep, Gen GI. So I'm involved as a supervisor in that clinic. But most of my role for the program director is kind of in a mentorship and administrative position for the fellows.
And then you practice a mix of general GI and hepatology, or?
Mostly general GI and motility, kind of side focus.
Dr. Kim, do you want to go next?
Sure. Brian Kim. I am at University of Southern California. So I am the program director here for the USC GI Fellowship. I did my transplant. I did my residency at Columbia, did my GI fellowship at Johns Hopkins, and then did my transplant hepatology at Mount Sinai. And I've been at USC for the past 10 years. And so I am a practicing transplant hepatologist. I actually do no general GI. So the general GI that I get are generally in grand rounds in our divisional conferences. That's the exposure I generally get. I do exclusively hepatology. We do have exclusive hepatology fellows clinic. So I don't have to staff motility and general GI cases. So that practice-wise, I do just hepatology.
Thank you. Dr. Aronsohn?
All right. So my name is Andrew Aronsohn. I'm also the program director at University of Chicago for the GI Fellowship. I've been here at University of Chicago since 2002 when I was an intern, and I've been here ever since, which seems crazy. So I'm a transplant hepatologist. The vast majority of my clinical work is in transplant hepatology. I do still do some general endoscopy, but not a whole lot. In all my clinics, as far as actually hands-on with fellows in clinic, our fellowship has a continuity clinic where fellows can pick in their second and third year what clinic they want to come to. So I oftentimes have our fellows in that clinic. Most of my administrative time with the fellowship is doing everything that these other folks have already described as far as recruitment, mentoring fellows, talking a lot about career development and things of that nature, getting people lined up with mentors, things like that. So that's actually probably my favorite part of the job. So that's the part that I like the most. But that's me.
Very cool, very cool. Well, it looks like we have a pretty good quorum of audience members here, right at 7. So for audience members, hello, and welcome. We've just done introductions, so you haven't missed much. If you have questions, please enter them in the chat, and we will address them as they come up and as they kind of fit in the conversation. In the meanwhile, we'll just kind of start off with some initial questions. Daniela, did you want to get us started with an initial question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, just give me a second. Okay, so I will start with this question. What are you looking for in a GI applicant?
Starting with the easy one, huh?
So I'll start. I think that for our program, we are not recruiting one singular phenotype of applicant. We are recruiting for excellence. So we are interested in, diversity in background, diversity in thought, diversity in research interests, diversity in clinical interests. That's really important to us. And also somebody that we know that we can mentor within our program and that would be a good fit for our particular training platform. So I think that there's a lot of different assets that each program knows, kind of their strengths and their own weaknesses. And so that's kind of what we're looking for, an applicant that would thrive in our training environment. And there's not one kind of singular thing that I could tell you they need to have on their application, but that's kind of how I would sum it up in a couple sentences.
Yeah, I agree. I share those sentiments from our program as well. There's not just like a secret sauce of something that we're looking for and filtering applications for. The other thing I think that it's hard to see it over Zoom, but we at our program, it's a lot different than medicine residency in the sense that it's much smaller. So culture is really important as far as programmatic culture. We have a really collegial atmosphere. It's very non-hierarchical. We want our fellows to get along. We want everyone, because we're all, our program is situated, we're kind of all in one spot. So, just it sounds kind of cheesy, but people helping each other, the people that are going to work well with each other, the people that, want to hang out outside the hospital together. Those are things that we think help a lot, go a long way as far as wellness for our fellows. And it's something we look for. But I agree with Ariel. There isn't like one thing that will definitely we want everyone to have, or definitely something we can't have anybody have, because diversity is certainly is really key as far as we want different fellows. We want people that are interested in different things and from different backgrounds. It makes our fellowship better.
I'll echo all of those things. I'll phrase it in a different way, though. I will say we are here doing this webinar because, I think Dr. Aday, Dr. Aronsohn we're in a very enviable position because gastroenterology is an exceedingly competitive field, and that we actually are blessed because we can ask for excellence. And that's the thing. The truth is, like, we look for everything, right? Like there are so many people applying, so many qualified applicants applying, that we don't look for one thing. We kind of want people to be good at almost everything. And that's unfortunately the truth of applying in GI, that you have to be well-rounded. Obviously, if you're excellent in one thing and you have the skill set that no one else has, those are all positive things. But you can't be a subpar clinician and a subpar something applying in GI, right? It's a very, very tough competitive field. 35% of people didn't match last year when they applied, which is the highest percentage of unmatched applicants in subspecialties in medicine. So maybe off the bat, you didn't want to hear that it's so competitive, but the reality is we look for everything, and you want to be able to kind of highlight your strength when you apply, because it's a very competitive field.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I will jump in really quick. I'm curious what you guys think about this, because Brian, you got me thinking about this a little bit. I guess we shouldn't say there's nothing that would be a deal breaker. And honestly, and maybe thinking about I like how you phrased it, Brian, but like thinking about the clinical excellence and professionalism. I think most of us are that has to be the given, and then we kind of start from there. So if you have sort of very lukewarm clinical letters, or if we can talk, I know we're going to talk about this more, or there is issues with professionalism, or there's something about, you know, this person isn't, you know, an engaged learner, or this person doesn't mean you need to be the smartest clinician or the best doctor on the service, or the one that's like, you know, figuring out every diagnosis, but someone that's, you know, working hard, is showing up on time, is the person that really wants to get better, to learn to take good care of patients. These are all the things that come through on letters. And if I, you know, every once in a while we'll get a letter that comes through, or a program director from someone, you know, that says, you know, this person, you know, they did okay, but, you know, a lot of times they weren't that interested on their cardiology rotation. They, you know, they weren't that into that. To me, that's a little bit of a red flag. That's so I would almost think of that as kind of the starting point, and then what else are you kind of bringing with your application? I don't know if you guys, I'm assuming you guys kind of agree with that, but if I had any thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, you know, I could talk ad nauseum about trying to decipher letters of recommendation. So we'll table that for a PD only discussion. But I think that you kind of hit on all the high points, that there are some kind of deal breakers. I think by the time applicants get to this level, that's sort of been weeded out. But you know, you do want to make sure that you're selecting your letter writers amongst kind of people that are going to write you strong letters. So I think it's always important to ask for somebody to write your letter that knows you really well, that has agreed to write you not just a letter, but a strong letter, because those, you know, one paragraph, half page, lukewarm letters really read, you know, when we read between the lines, it doesn't look very good. So I think that, you know, and it might not reflect truly on the applicant. It might just be that letter writer doesn't know the applicant, but a big name and a poor letter are far worse than kind of an unknown physician writing a very strong letter.
I agree with both of you on all points.
I guess building off those comments, so I know a lot of some applicants come from giant liver centers and they work with the greats in liver, but a lot of people don't, and they come from smaller places that may not have as much exposure, or even exposure to, you know, tertiary liver care or liver transplant. Do you have any advice for those residents who maybe are doing good clinical work, but aren't getting that kind of liver exposure, that you'd say, this is somebody who's, you know, who's really into liver based on what they've been able to show me that they've done, and etc.?
I think those are all challenges that unfortunately not everyone can be in a place that does, you know, 150, 200 transplants. That it's the reality of, you know, the distribution of people applying across the country. You're not going to have exposure in terms of having the world expert in a certain, you know, liver field at your center that you can work with on research. Those things are unfortunately not something that's common, and great for them if they have those opportunities and take advantage of that, which we obviously, just because you have those experiences doesn't mean that you are utilizing those opportunities. So we see plenty of people come from big institutions that don't do work, you know, work with the people that are obviously there, or have had enough exposure to them that they have a positive outtake on you, right? So just because you're there doesn't mean, it might set you up for some exposure, but you still have to do the work and put in the hours to show that kind of commitment in terms of whether it be clinical or research. And for those that don't have those opportunities, though, it's really, we look for people who utilize whatever opportunities that they have in that institution, right? It may not, again, be that, you know, big name that's, you know, the president of the society that you get to work with, but there are plenty of people that, and plenty of opportunities, and most places have gastroenterologists that you can work with, and really showing that commitment to work within the space you're given is some of the things we look for.
We've also had residents rotate through our transplant service that come from institutions that don't have transplant, or maybe not as strong of a hepatology division, and that's another opportunity to kind of gain exposure, or also help kind of facilitate identifying a research mentor that you kind of work with clinically and then continue the relationship after the rotation. So that's another option. Additionally, we're at a big state institution, and so our program has PLAs with other program letters of agreement with other smaller institutions that don't necessarily have transplant to offer, and so those residents can rotate through pretty seamlessly without having to go through a lot of red tape.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, I'll speak for myself. I mean, I would so much rather have a letter or an endorsement from a hepatologist or somebody that, quote, like no one has heard of or isn't like a big name, that says like, oh, this person's great, they work hard, I've done all this work with them, than like some big famous hepatologist that writes like a few paragraphs that's like generic. I mean, I don't care if they're I mean, I don't think anybody of us, we don't really care. We don't, because we're not matching the big famous person, we're matching the person they're working with. Having said that, so I think that it shouldn't matter if that person is sort of well known or whatever. If you're doing good work with that person and they can vouch for you, that goes the longest way. But having said that, I think there's also a time to be realistic. So if you're at a program that you have almost no exposure to hepatology or very little exposure to hepatology, play to your strengths. Every program has something really great to offer, whether it's community-based medicine or whether it's a lot of procedural time or whether it's teaching or whatever you're doing. I mean, there's always something good there's many things good at every program, but play to the strengths. So don't write a personal statement how you want to be a transplant hepatologist, and the first question you're going to get on your interview is, tell me why you like liver, and you're like, oh, I read a bunch of articles and I think it seems cool. Like, you have to have some lived experience to say that, just to make it kind of believable. That doesn't mean when you get to the program you can't be a hepatologist. You certainly can, and you can, you might be looking for programs that have hepatology, but always lead with your strengths, right? So make sure that the thing that you've really done a lot of, if you rotated through a community-based clinic and you've done a lot of really good primary care, like that's something that you can talk about. That's something that you can build off of that would be important to a lot of programs. So think about playing to those strengths.
And I will also say that whatever you guys tell us that you're interested in hepatology doesn't mean you're going into hepatology.
Right.
I will say, I think all the programs director on will agree that I would say anecdotally, half the people who apply to our fellowships have some interest in hepatology, and not nearly half the people come out graduating wanting to be a hepatologist. So it's good to have goals and it's good to have interest going into an application season, because you want to be able to think about the future, right? This isn't medical school where you're applying and you want to help people and you like science, right? That's like everyone's personal statement, right? This is we know you want to take care of patients. That's why you're here. That's why you're a physician. Now, in what realm do you think you can make a difference? And if you've thought about that, and if hepatology jumps out at something that you see your mentors doing and you want to emulate, that's great. Say that. But I will say, we have had fellows that have applied, were passionate about hepatology as residents, and now they're doing IBD, right? So that's what fellowship is for. So it again does not eliminate, just because you didn't have that experience as a resident does not eliminate that you can be in that space going forward. But yeah, be genuine about your interests. And so it shouldn't be a knock on you that you can't say you're going to be a transplant hepatologist 100% coming into applying as a resident.
Thank you. And I have some questions here in the chat. One of the questions that comes a lot is how much the score for the steps mattered in this case for GI. Specifically, they are asking about the step 3. What do you think, your experience?
So I think that we've moved away from filtering out applicants based on any sort of step score. I think there's a lot of literature out there that kind of confirm that there is a bias towards certain groups of people based on step 1 scores. Step 3 is required by our GME office to accept anyone into fellowship. So step 3, we need to have it. I can't tell you that there's a particular score that would, eliminate somebody's chances of getting an interview. That being said, I think that it is still something that we all look at. And if, there's, they have score super high on 1 and 2, and then they're, barely passing on step 3. I think that we can kind of all recognize that they probably mailed it in on that one. But I think that that's incredibly uncommon. Typically step 2 and 3 are fairly in line with one another.
Agree. We don't really look at scores anymore. In fact, I don't even forward score. I mean, I see them, but I don't forward them to interviewers and the people in our selection committee that are ranking people. So we've essentially gotten rid of them. I will say though, failing any of the steps, although it's not a deal breaker, it is a little bit something that we kind of look into a little bit more carefully. I'm not going to say that someone couldn't match if they failed one of their steps, but and certainly if someone had failed a step, we would at some point want to discuss kind of circumstances surrounding it. And oftentimes, there's personal issues, and all those things are absolutely understandable, and we don't have a hard and fast rule. But that, for us, that's kind of the one thing we would kind of look twice and want to talk a little bit more about.
I agree. We don't look at scores that closely. As Dr. Aday say, especially in certain groups, it's not predictive at all. The one predictive factor that it does have is it predicts future test scores. So you do have one test that you do have to pass that the ACGME looks at, which is your licensing ABIM test. So if you're very, very low, it might give us pause when we're deciding from interviewing one person or the other. And it's tough being in this position because you guys are all awesome candidates. If you don't match at the #1 place that you want to match at, it is not because you're not a great physician and won't do great things in the future. It is because it is very hard to, when you have, all these great applicants, to try to, categorize them. It's impossible, and we make mistakes. And so, I'm sure there are people who could have, in retrospect, we should have ranked them higher. They wanted to be here, all those things. But we do use all the information we have. It would be not prudent to do so, right? So if we think that, hey, their score is so low that we might be a little stressed about their board passage rate in the future, and there's what we think is an equally attractive candidate and we interview, and we only have a set amount of people we need to interview, I mean, maybe that's the tiebreaker. So I can't say that it doesn't go into our assessment, it does, but it's definitely something that's much, 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 much lower on our list of things we look at.
Great.
In your opinion, where do things like the non-accredited hepatology fellowships fit in if one thinks that they're not competitive enough for this round of a GI application, or they've applied and they're among the 35% who didn't match? Is that something that kind of bumps them up in terms of, oh, this person is clearly interested, or does it really not help that much, or is it what you make of it?
I guess I'll start on this one. This is a harder question. I mean, I think this kind of gets into a little bit of what do you do with the year where if you have a year where you're not going straight from residency to fellowship, whether you're taking a gap year, whether you're going to be a hospitalist, whether you're doing a non-accredited fellowship. I think, to me, it all is about the context. And I think I would just recommend, at least for, I guess, everything we're saying, I guess we're only speaking about our own programs and, but, for me, it's all about context. So, doing an extra year of a non-ACGME, hepatology, nutrition, IBD, or something like that, talk about why that is. Okay. And I'm a very transparent person. I like it when people are transparent on their applications. I don't even mind if somebody says, I didn't match and I was really upset about it. And here are all the things that I'm doing to make my application better. And I'm really into nutrition, or I'm into IBD or hepatology. So, and just be honest with it. If you took a year off, there's a big difference between someone in your family was sick, or you were waiting for your partner to finish whatever they're doing, then, I didn't, be honest with what those things are. And I think that, to me, so to use your example, if you did a non-ACGME hepatology year, it becomes pretty clear, like, are you actually interested in hepatology, and that's like something you want to do and you wanted to get some more training, or like you're just trying to pad your CV a little bit. And I think by having a little context, don't be afraid, at least from my perspective. I like it when people are honest in their personal statements. Don't be afraid to talk about your personal circumstances and why you're in that place. Because there's honestly, there's a ton of right answers. There's not like a wrong thing to say. And I feel like as long as it's explained, it really is, it's helpful for us, because we're all going to be very open-minded about every application.
Yeah, I agree with everything's been said. In all honesty, when you do your third year, right, or your year after, when you have that gap year, by the time you apply, you might not have done anything in that field at all, right? So like, people are applying right now who literally just started doing that fellowship. So in a lot of ways, this year matters to show, hey, I'm putting in the work to do something, right? But it's the previous year that probably matters more. What did you do during that previous year when, let's say, you didn't match and you're taking a gap year? Did you do research? Did you commit yourself to making yourself a better applicant? And so we look at that. So is it better or not? I would say it's neutral for me. It's neither here nor there. Like Dr. Aronsohn said, it's really how you frame it and what you make of that year.
And I think I'll comment on this from a different slant. So let's say we're discussing an applicant that has not applied yet. So they're not in the unmatched category, but they maybe did the year to gain exposure to hepatology and decided this is the career for them. And like Brian was saying, maybe they'll wait till the end of that year because they have to have an informed decision. But I think that there's not I wouldn't say that it is looked at favorably or unfavorably, but I agree with Andrew. It does need to be explained in some way. Why did you go that route rather than directly applying? Or a hospitalist year is also not something that is viewed as negatively, because there's plenty of fellows that do that for financial reasons, or maybe they had a child, or they were just kind of looking for a change of pace. And I think from a transplant standpoint, obviously if you're doing that non-ACGME accredited year, you go into the interview saying, I want to be a transplant hepatologist, then you have to be fully aware that ACGME is going to require you to do another transplant year. And so kind of full disclosure there, make sure that everybody's informed on kind of what has to happen to be transplant eligible.
And I think it comes to, the following question would be, also they are asking about the value of doing a cheap year before applying to fellowship.
I can start. I think it's great. It's almost like a built-in endorsement from your program, right? We read lots of letters, and they are all, and I don't know if you guys as applicants have had a chance to read these letters. We have on this side. At some point, you guys are going to be on our side, and you would read these letters. It's very, very hard to, again, in a lot of ways, rank people. But that's what we're asked to do. We're ranking people, but everyone has different goals, different, qualifications, different strengths. But yet we're still asked to say that, would we rather have this person or this person in our program? And it's a tough job. And if the program themselves are endorsing you as someone among their class, saying that, hey, you have the skill set to be lead us in this certain category, I think that's great. So if you can, and again, if you have to graduate, you can't take that extra year, you have other reasons why you can't do that, that is fine. But if you have the means to do that, I think it really plays to your strength, right? So, there are applicants, I would say, from UT Southwestern, we always get, because you guys do such a great job of endorsing your programs, everyone was interested in GI. So there's like 15 people applying in GI from UT Southwestern. We are not interviewing 15 people, okay, from UT Southwestern. So we might say, hey, these are great applicants, but we might be able to only afford to interview 1 or 2 people from each program. And hey, there's this someone who meets all these criteria and they happen to be a chief resident and they want to be on the West Coast. Hey, that's great, right? We might offer them an interview for those reasons.
Yeah, as a former chief resident, I will say that it was a very transformative year for me. And it's interesting to me as a program director to hear it from an applicant standpoint where they're hesitant to take the plunge to do a chief year. So my career trajectory was forever changed by doing a chief year. So I think if you are given that opportunity, I can't think of a reason not to do it unless there's a financial circumstance or some other kind of personal reason not to do it. But I think that it does help kind of, if you're looking at all the applicants from one program, like Brian was saying, which we cannot ever interview every single one of them, the chief residents are certainly going to stand out amongst the rest. So it is a way to separate yourself almost immediately, apart from all these other things like, research and board scores and all these other accolades.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. Full disclosure, I was a chief myself. It was a great year. And, I think it also, it does do a lot of kind of not a lack of a better term, some of the screening for us, because you already know that this person has been selected from people that really know this person, that have been working with them for a few years. I also think, when we match chiefs in our program, they oftentimes have I think it gives you a really unique and kind of mature perspective of how things work in a system, and working sometimes in frustrating systems or difficult situations. They tend to have a little bit more, a lot of times have just problem solving skills. Not to say you couldn't have developed those skills in other facets of your life, but I do think it's but again, and I'll tell you, and I don't know if you guys have seen this, a lot of program directors, IM program directors, if someone's not a chief, will actually write like, John Smith was going to be a chief, but he wasn't doing the chief year because of X, Y, or Z, or he wanted to jump right into the GI fellowship. I mean, we read those and that's helpful. So even if you were being asked to be a chief and you had another reason, like you guys had already pointed out, whether it's financial, whether it's personal, that's all okay. Like, don't feel like you have to like sacrifice your life for this year to do it, because often I've seen a lot of letters, a good IMPD letter will include that, which to me is then you're just saying, okay, this is somebody that was selected.
And I'll say this for the people that are on visas. So we did have some of the chief residents, that position was not available for people that were on J1s. We have a significant IMG population in our residency program. And so I think that program directors understand that. So if you're on J1, then you might not be eligible. We've kind of figured out some back ways to get our J1 residents as chief residents in the past, but we are cognizant of all of the visa issues.
And talking about the visa situation, I have a couple of questions about that as well here in the chat. One of the questions is like, if the visa requirement will affect being selected for an interview.
I
do think, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, we as an institution don't accept certain visas. And there's nothing around it. It's just our GME. So other than that, the ones that do have certain visas, we do accept.
Our program accepts J1s. We don't accept H1Bs through the fellowship program. They only are approved through the PIPP program, so coming in as residents. And you know, I've become kind of a visa guru, not by choice, but necessity, because we do have a lot of trainees that have been on visas and kind of helping them navigate the situation and you know, figuring out kind of different career paths and you know, writing to the federal government. There's all these different kind of hoops you have to jump through, but that does not affect my decision to interview them. So if they're an excellent candidate, they're getting an interview regardless of their if they're on a J1.
Yeah, University of Chicago, we accept all visas. And again, it's not a knock on, it's just the institution. These are things that are way above all of our pay grades. I'm sure all of us would like to accept all visas. We do, and so we're lucky from that standpoint. So we don't look, I don't even look at it, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. I have other questions here too. How important is the interview for the final rank? Are most applicants pre-ranked before the interview, or how is important?
I guess I'll start this one. The interview is very important because that's our one chance to get to know you, and it's probably even more important now that they're on Zoom because, well, I don't know, it's a different kind of important because it's just a different way of interacting with somebody. So for us, you know, I'll tell you our numbers. You know, we're interviewing 50 people this year, or somewhere around there, and you know, every person on our list is the same until after the interview. There's not, you know, it's all just one big category until after the interview. I can even tell you, you know, there's no secrets here. I can tell you our process might be helpful for people to hear, like how we kind of come up with our rank list is that you know, we have everybody is invited, everyone's on the same footing once they're inviting. There's no rank list before. Everybody interviews with different faculty members, and then we have our entire GI faculty attend a rank meeting where we go through each person who interviewed individually, and there's a scoring system that everyone has given for each person that they meet with, and then we discuss them as a group holistically, based on, you know, what they're adding to the program, and the rank list is made out of that. So there's no so this way we've had a chance to see their application, we've had a chance to talk to them, we've had a chance to get an understanding of what they're looking for. And really, you know, we've talked a lot about how competitive it is, but you know, we're on our end, we want a good fit, right? We want somebody that is going to fit in with the clinical, academic, the culture of our program. And these are all things that, when I say holistically, we kind of go over all of those things together, and then the rank list is kind of made out of that meeting. There, I just gave all our secrets, but I have a feeling it's not such a secret.
Why did you do that?
I guess that's what everybody. I guess that's what everybody does. I don't think it's so. I don't think it's such a. It's not such like a privileged information.
We need to talk afterwards. You gave out all the. No, I agree. We do exactly the same thing, right? There is no pre-rank list. You know, if that was the case, we wouldn't obviously interview. It's a lot of time and commitment from our faculty and for you guys too. But paper, we don't rank paper, right? Because that's what it is. Right now, you guys are an imaginary kind of entity on paper. And if that translated to who you were, you know, I think we'd all be in trouble, right? So I think we really want to get a sense of, again, you know, all the things that may not be on paper, to try to decide how you, again, rank, which is, you know, impossible to do. We also want to make sure that whatever is written on that application is consistent with those things that we interviewed you for, right? So we are interviewing because we think you're going to be excellent in this, in patient care and all those things. And then when you come in, you're like, I don't care about any of that. This is what I'm interested in, right? And then we may take some pause, right? So these are all things that we're looking at, that we're not to say that we're not we are using the combination of your application and the interview to rank you, right? So as much as, yes, we don't have a, pre-ranked thing, we're still going to go back to your application and say, hey, given this interview and given what the program director said, given all what the letters have said, and given what their achievements have been thus far and what they plan to do in the future, because I think that's very, very important. How would we position ourselves and say, are they a good fit for us? Do you think that we can further their career in our program?
I agree with Brian and Andrew completely. I think that the interview is so important because by the time they're, interviewing at the program, we already reviewed and re-reviewed their applications. They're excellent candidates. And that's kind of where we are able to kind of adjust the playing field. The area where it gets a little bit complicated is when we have 3 interviews. Most of the time, all of the interviews are kind of scoring the applicant at the same level. And there are, certain applicants where there's a huge variability amongst the interviewers. And those are the ones that we kind of go back to the drawing board and kind of re-review the application. What went wrong? Why did this person feel so strongly that this person should have been ranked really low and the other person scored them near the top? And so that's kind of where we deliberate. But otherwise, the interview, those are kind of very important 20 to 30 minutes for the applicant.
All right. I guess as a follow-up question, thinking about, things that make somebody stand out, so we talked about the importance of kind of the chief year as kind of a pre-selection. Are there any other, GI or liver specific things that stand out? I'm thinking about how much does, being an emerging liver scholar matter, or presenting 10 abstracts at ACG, or, being third author or first author on a paper? Where do those things kind of fit when you're kind of assessing somebody, maybe seeing if you want to offer them an interview?
A full disclosure, I was not a chief president, unlike these two. So you can still match in gastroenterology, even if you're not a chief president. It's almost impossible, though. No, I'm just kidding. It is not. So majority of people are not chief presidents. So don't stress out about that. That's not, there are only things that you can control, right? To the point where you're applying, there are things that you can control, and those are the letter writers, right? You can control that. You can actually pick the letter writers. You control your personal statement. So I know people poo-poo the personal statement. You've heard that. But I think it's actually, we look at that all the time to figure out what your goals are for the future. It's the one time where you can communicate, and consolidate all of your application into one single kind of message, right? So personal statement, where it might not have been very important up to now, I think for our program, and I can't speak for all programs, I think it's very, very important, okay? So in terms of other things that make them more attractive, are that kind of, I think, mature applications for us, people who have a vision for what they want to do, and then have had a work, whatever it may be, whether it be research or, working on, becoming better teachers or something that kind of puts your actual career trajectory, and make it more clear for us and how we can play a role in that. So I think that bumps people up much more than, and it's not to say that you have to have everything lined up for your 5-year plan or your 10-year plan, but the fact that you thought about those plans are important for, I think, us at this level of your career. You're not, again, applying in medical school or even internal medicine where you say, you know what, I'm just want to learn, which may be true, but it's gonna, when you compare it to someone who has equal qualifications on paper, then next to you that have been like, I want to learn so that I can do this in the future, they seem more mature as an applicant than others.
Yeah, I would agree with Brian. I think that as far as the volume of publications, I think we would all agree that it's quality over quantity. So The person with 10 abstracts at ACG, I would much rather talk to the person that's kind of worked really hard on their original research project, taken it to, oral presentation and manuscript stage, and they're continuing to work in that same realm that tells a story of where that person's going to kind of focus their energy during fellowship. We have a lot of applicants that have very broad kind of research areas of interest, and it as a reviewer, it makes it really difficult for me to figure out what do they actually want to do with their career, and their personal statement might be very vague. So I do think that it's important to kind of, if you do know what you want to do, if you're on the Liver Fellow Network, I'm assuming you want to do hepatology, feel free to write that in your personal statement and focus your energy kind of on those efforts, and kind of build that story for yourself.
I completely agree, and I'm glad to hear this from you guys, because this is the advice I give our residents. So I'm glad to hear I'm not like giving them bad advice over the last couple of years. Yeah, I think what is your story? What is your narrative? And it's I don't know who every year goes around passing rumors around internal medicine residencies that it's like some kind of contest of how many names you can get, how many times your name can get on an abstract or a case report. Like somehow there's like, we're judging by like weight of like the CV or something. We really don't care. We want something that's authentic. We want something that really shows. And trust me, we can read a CV and a personal statement and know, is this someone that just did as many projects as they could to try to get into GI fellowship, or is this somebody that's really taken an interest? So, I would also say, for those of you that are earlier on in this process, wherever you guys are, if you're thinking, as you're taking on new projects, like think about what your personal statement might read, how that might read, and how is that going to fit into it. You guys are busy internal medicine residents. You got a lot of stuff going on. Your time is not unlimited. So be selective about what you're going to do and focus your efforts on. If it's something you said, yeah, this would never be something I would talk about, I don't even really care, I'm going to be a third author. I mean, is it really worth you spending time on? Do that thing that you're passionate about. And trust me, when we interview people and they're doing a project like that, and we can see their faces kind of light up, and there was this cool thing, or they've really benefited from the mentorship, like we get that. We're going to see that. I'm stealing a phrase from one of our colleagues. Alan knows Sonia Kupfer, so it's her line, not mine. But it's focused but flexible, right? So you have a direction you're going on. You're not saying like, I'm going to be a transplant hepatologist no matter what. I'm going to die if I don't. But like, yeah, this is what I'm interested in. We know you haven't done a day of fellowship yet. This is where I'm going, but here's all the things that have sort of got me to this place. When we all understand on day 2, you may decide you want to be an interventional endoscopist, and that's fine. But just have that focus, but maintain the flexibility.
And we can see through the third author abstracts, right? So because we read we read the letters, right? We read your mentors' letters, and if they say, hey, they were a third author, but they contributed, right? This was their idea. They just didn't have the time to write because the fellow wrote the abstract, right? Or something. But if never mentioned that they were a participant of that study, right? Those things matter, right? So we definitely look at quality over quantity.
Thank you.
I will also say, you don't have to also have an oral project or anything like that. So again, most of us won't have that. But if you're in the process of working on a project and dedicating your time and showing commitment, that you can reflect on in your personal statement, and your advisor or your letter writer can reflect on, that matters more than, again, having 4 case reports where you're the first author of, on a obscure whatever case. Those things are good. Those things are good in the sense that I think that gives you exposure to your advisors, okay, and say that, hey, I took it upon myself to write these things, and hopefully they will say good things about you in that. But in and of itself, those things don't move the needle in terms of research, right, potential, right, writing, but it hopefully shows your commitment to getting publications and working with your mentors. And in that way, I think it's more valuable than, again, having your name on a publication per se.
Thank you. So I have other questions here. One of them is, do you make any difference between MDs and DOs and IMGs versus US medical graduates?
I can start with this one. No, we don't. We don't have any kind of difference between if you're a IMG or MD or DO, or I think we don't really go. I mean, those labels aren't as important to us. I think what's more important to us is, are you coming from a training environment that is going to prepare you for a similar training environment that we have? And I think this is an important thing, is that you want to be honest. You're all doctors, you're all going to be gastroenterologists, like, maybe hepatologists. Like the name of the place is way less important. It's about the fit and what type of place fits with what you want to do. Our program, we are very interested in academic medicine. There'll be a lot of time bought out for research. There's a lot, if you're somebody who is in a community-based residency program and you want to go back home and join your family and be a community-based doctor, yeah, we can train you for that, but there's way better programs in our program that's going to train you for that. And, nobody cares, nobody cares about the name of the place you went to the day after you leave. Actually, nobody cares really ever. And it's about the fit. So what I would say is, if you're coming from a program that is training you in a certain way and you're thinking this is what you want to be doing down the road, select programs to apply to that will have similar philosophies. You may not know it off the bat, and you may not say, oh, I can tell from the website. But as you're thinking about your rank list, I really am just begging everybody to think about, really be honest with yourself of what you want to be doing. And if that coincides with what your career plans are, and that's what the program is offering, then that's a great thing. But really kind of we're thinking about fit from our end, and I'm asking you guys should be thinking about fit from your end, because that was what makes a successful GI fellow.
And I'll let you guys in on a little secret. So fellowship program directors are much more interested in where you went for residency training, as Andrew was saying. So it's far less important where you went to medical school. And most of the bigger name programs that have a lot of experience with kind of IMGs and DOs and multiple different phenotypes. So it's not something that we kind of shy away from, or that we weigh with more importance than these other things that we've been discussing.
I agree. But the reality is that DOs and international graduates do have a tougher time matching in gastroenterology percentage-wise. So as much as we can speak about that in this group, and there's just 3 of us in hundreds of programs, right? That it is going to be more challenging, right? And that may, again, it may not reflect necessarily your degree per se and where you got that degree, but where that degree took you in terms of your internal medicine training, and how that fits, that type of training fits with the environment that you are applying to in terms of fellowship, like Dr. Aronsohn said.
Okay. Another question that's come into the chats is thinking about, in the hepatology space, this 2+1 versus 3+1 track, and whether or not, if you're dead set on hepatology, that's something you should be looking for exclusively. Do you find that people come in wanting to do it and then realize that actually they'd rather do the 3+1? What are your thoughts on that, and how do you counsel somebody?
So ACGME over the past couple of years have changed their wording, and so you can do the 2+1 and position the transplant year either as a second year or a third year, in addition to the traditional 3+1 configuration. So I think that all of those are options, in programs that are approved to do the fast track. And it's it's up to the trainee for our program. I cannot speak to every single program that offers transplant, but right now, we have 2 transplant hepatology positions, and one of our transplant fellows is a second year, one of them is a third year. So the third year is going to graduate, the second year is going to come back to me to complete general GI. And it's really just up to the trainee. I will say, over the past 5 years, our trainees are more interested in doing the fast track than the 3+1 configuration, but some have opted to do like a master's in clinical research or T32, and still do kind of the 3+1, but not necessarily 3 years of clinical prior to the transplant year.
Yeah, I think it's entirely more up to the applicants and where they are in terms of their personal situation, if they want to take the 3 years or the 4 years. Obviously, having the flexibility to get that 3 years and having the combined program, if you're open to that, maybe you might prioritize that in terms of where you rank these places. But by definition, if you have a combined program, you have to have a 4th year that you offer. So it'll still give you the flexibility of doing that 4th year at that same institution, if you rank that place. And if you feel like, hey, my GI skills aren't up to where I want to be after these 2 years, maybe I should do that 3rd year before I do something like a transplant hepatology fellowship. And
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I'll say we also look at it on our side. So we will, not that this has come up exclusive for any of our fellows, but we also look to make sure that, because you have to be ACGME, meet all ACGME milestones for both when you graduate. So if we think after your 2nd year, because we operate during our 3rd year, you are not meeting your GI, general GI, we would not offer it to you in the first place. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I think that was important. Don't forget too that I don't think there's any program that would make you commit to one or the other before you start fellowship. So I wouldn't worry about it so much, just because there's pluses and minuses. And I think it's a pretty individual decision as far as where your career trajectory is going, your comfort level with GI, all these things, that it's a lot of kind of guessing before you get started. So, but what I think is probably more important as you're thinking about programs is, if you have an interest in hepatology, certainly, and this is kind of stating the obvious, certainly thinking about a program that has a busy hepatology service, or at least mentorship and patient care that you're going to be able to see within hepatology and liver transplant, and ideally having a transplant hepatology fellowship themselves. Like you guys were saying, there's a lot of people end up staying. We do recruit people from outside, but a lot of people end up staying either for the 2+1 or the 3+1, or however you do it. So, if you're going to put something on your list, I think having an active transplant fellowship is nice. And also, that's a nice mentorship opportunity to kind of, as you're a 1st-year fellow, to get to know the transplant fellows, to see how they're doing things. I mean, that's a nice kind of senior person to junior person type of relationship that I think a lot of our fellows, Alan doesn't scare off too many of our 1st-year fellows. In fact, they actually kind of like them. So that ends up working. It is in all seriousness, that's a nice relationship when they can be able to learn from some of the transplant fellows and senior fellows.
And talking about the transplant hepatology fellowship, what if the applicants don't get interviews in programs that actually have a 4-year or the combined, but they are still interested in the transplant fellowship? How they can make their CV more competitive, like whenever they are finishing their GI fellowship, to apply for a transplant fellowship?
So I will say that the honest truth is, the bottleneck is to get into the GI fellowship. What was it, guys? About half of them matched into transplant nationally last year. We had about
we have way more transplant spots that went unmatched than applicants, and that's every year. So if you're interested in transplant, it might not be the specific program you want to go to. because that always changes depending on how many internal spots they have, things like that. But you'll match at a program for transplant.
And some of the top programs go unmatched, and they send out emails to the program director listserv, kind of soliciting applicants. So the ball is in your court.
I mean, I can't understand why. It's like the best, it's the best career in the world, but apparently not everyone wants to do it, which is shocking to me, but I guess it's true.
Here's a
I mean,
provocative
especially because they, a lot of us, I think, are interested in transplant hepatology as internal medicine residents because of, I think, the pathophysiology and all those things that you love, and that's why you went into medicine, and that's what you love. And then, though, when you go into fellowship, you hold that scope, you fall in love with that. So I know a lot of the people here are interested in hepatology, but I'm willing to bet a portion of you are not going into transplant hepatology in the future.
Do you think that if one's heart truly is with hepatology, that there's any kind of long-term career benefit just to doing a non-accredited fellowship and getting on with being a hepatologist, or are we not there yet, kind of as a community or society?
I don't think we're there yet. I think there's so much overlap between GI and hepatology that it's very, very hard to practice or hepatology without knowing some gastroenterology or having the skill set of a gastroenterologist.
Agree.
And also the board eligibility is, if you only do the non-ACGME, we're out of the kind of grandfather years where you could do that, but yeah, you're not equipped like those that go through the traditional path.
Very good, Craig. So the final 3 minutes, what questions do we not ask you that you want applicants to know, or you want us to know about, hepatology and GI and things that we should be doing or asking? We did it all. We can post this video and never have to have another video about this kind of stuff again.
I think I will just mention again how stressful this process is for you guys, and how this doesn't tell you anything about your capacity to be a physician, this process. You're going to have your co-residents get interviewed at a place that you really wanted to be at. And you might say, well, I'm such a stronger resident. And but that's, again, this is unfortunately the way that this process works. But we do know that if you have the, you will, I think you have to be realistic about the places that you have to apply. You have to obviously use all the kind of advantages you can get, right? And in the end, you will come out to be a gastroenterologist if you get to match. And so as sometimes it could be bruising to our egos at some points where you say, hey, I really wanted to be at that program and I know I could do it. The process is such that we unfortunately can accommodate everyone, despite the fact that you guys are all, amazing applicants. And I think you guys probably, the other program directors will say probably the same thing in your application review process that we say all the time, which is, man, if I played now, I don't think I would get an interview, right? I think that's said out loud by every single one of our gastroenterologists that review all of your applications. And that just shows you how competitive this process is. Please don't get discouraged. And all of the things opportunities you have, hang on to them. And those are the wins that you have. And those are hopefully the things that drive you forward.
I agree with everything that Brian was saying. And I do want to remind you guys, and this isn't anything anybody wants to hear, but this is truly an imperfect system. And we are doing our best to really make sure that we have good fits of the right people in the right programs. But, I like what you said, Brian. You may see your co-resident getting interviews at a place you think you should. And, I would also just add one thing is, don't be afraid to express, reasons why a certain program makes sense for you as you're interviewing or if you're following up with an email or whatever you're doing. The one problem with Zoom interviews is when it was all in person, there was like a built-in filter that we would know if someone was interested because they'd get on a plane. For me, they would get on a plane from Los Angeles and fly all the way to Chicago. I know they meant business because they're taking that time and effort. There's lots of issues with that of why that's unfair to a lot of people, but at the same time, when we have a Zoom, it's very difficult from our end to filter out who's really interested and who is not. Things that will matter to me, my sister lives in Chicago, I visit there all the time, or I have this reason why I want to be there. My partner has a great job offer in Chicago, or this is one of the, so don't be afraid to share some of those reasons, because that helps us. We want to match, all of us want to match people that have ranked us number one on their list, because we want the people that want to be with us and we want to be with them. It's like, kind of like this like sad dating scheme, but but that's what we're really looking for. So as much as you're comfortable, and I'm not telling you to share things you're not comfortable with, but as much as you're comfortable, feel free to share reasons why a particular program would be a good fit for you to us. That helps us with the process.
And I'll just kind of play off of what Andrew just mentioned. So I think for this year, it's kind of not going to happen, but for next year, we do have tokens. So if there are any 2025 applicants, you are going to have tokens that you can send to your top choice programs. So we've had the geographic selections for the past couple of years, but I know that myself and the other program directors are really excited to be able to see the tokens so that we can kind of see who's really serious about our program in particular and who's window shopping, because it's really hard to figure out when you can apply to a lot more programs in the Zoom era. The other thing I want to mention that kind of hasn't been said yet is find a true mentor at your program that is willing to be brutally honest with you. So there's nothing more important than somebody that's kind of willing to sit down and kind of lay it all out there for you, especially when you're going through the application process. And it does not have to be a gastroenterologist, but you want somebody that is going to tell you kind of how competitive you are amongst typical GI applicants, and help you go through programs and figure out kind of what's a reach for you, what's the middle of the road, and what's kind of a program where you would be a shoo-in for, and apply kind of a three-tiered approach so that you have a little bit more security. The people that I've seen internally that haven't matched have applied extremely narrowly. So I think that it's important to have an open mind and make the decision of whether you'd rather kind of not be a gastroenterologist or you'd not want to live in a particular region of the country.
Thank you very much. Well, it is 8 o'clock in Chicago. So I just want to thank, the three of you for being here and spending the time fielding these questions. I know you get these questions all the time in a lot of different forums, but it is, very helpful to hear again and again. And I'd like to thank our audience as well for tuning in to help with all this. We will be cleaning this up and posting this on the Liver Fellow Network, so that people who weren't able to make it today can kind of listen and feel reassured and kind of take the tips away that we provided here. So I just want to say thank you very much to the three of you and to my wonderful co-host, Daniela.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.